Good morning. Happy fall. Happy Halloween. We're closing in on Dia de los Muertos. I've got people from Delaware on the line today. That's fantastic. And also people from local schools here in Los Angeles where I live. Many of you know me. My name is Antonio Sacre. I am a storyteller and an author. If you are watching with kids right now, and they're watching me live, could you put that in the chat? Just the kids are watching. I know that many of you are going to use this recording later on in the classroom, but it helps me to know if there are some kids watching right now. I am going to tell you two scary stories. One is a real scary story, and one is a made up scary story. And it is scary in the way that if you were like me and did not like scary stories in school, I did not like scary stories at all. I didn't like scary movies. One of my best friends from grade school loved scary movies. I'd go over to Gary's house and Gary would say, let's watch a scary movie. And I'd say, Gary, let's watch not a scary movie. He says, we're going to watch a scary movie. I'm like, no, we're not. And then Gary's mom would come down and she'd say, come on now, little Antonio. She called me Tony. She said, little Tony, it's time to watch a scary movie. The Taylor's house was a disaster for me. All right, let me take a quick peek here. Yes, there are some kids watching live from Wilmington and in Delaware. That is fantastic. Hello, kids watching live from Wilmington, Delaware. I grew up in Newcastle, Delaware, and I live in Los Angeles. And when I was in third grade, my teacher said we had to write a story. And here's the scary part. It couldn't be a one-page story. It couldn't be a two-page story. It had to be a 5-page story. A 5-page story. I was only writing little paragraphs. How was I going to write a 5-page story? I had no idea. So I thought about my favorite uncle, my Uncle Tom, my mom's older brother. And my Uncle Tom is a funny guy. And my Uncle Tom is an interesting guy. And my Uncle Tom was a firefighter. And my Uncle Tom, and as soon as I started thinking about my Uncle Tom and all the places he took me and my brothers and my cousins, I began to realize it would be pretty easy for me to write a 5-page story. When kids ask me how I became an author or what's the first book I ever wrote, the first book I ever wrote was in third grade, a 5-page story about the time my Uncle Tom took us to the beach. You're not going to think that sounds like a scary story, but it is, because this is what happened. He threw 12 of us cousins in the car. Back then, seatbelts didn't exist. So there was 12 of us in the station wagon. And on the way to the beach, Uncle Tom was swerving left and swerving right. And we go, go faster, Uncle Tom. And he'd swerve left and swerve right. Go faster, Uncle Tom. And on the way to the beach, we finally got there. And Uncle Tom gave us peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Anybody scared yet? And we ate those peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And he says, boys and girls, he's from Boston, so he has a Boston accent. Boys and girls, did you all like those peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? We love the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. He says, well, I'm going to go swimming and you can't go swimming for 30 minutes. Why not, Uncle Tom? If you go swimming before 30 minutes is up, you know what's going to happen? What? You're gonna die. And the oldest cousin started laughing. We're not going to die, Uncle Tom. I was the middle cousin. I was about 8 years old. I said, we're not going to die, Uncle Tom. But little Marky was 4 years old. He said, I don't want to die. And Uncle Tom said, then wait 30 minutes before you go swimming. Uncle Tom went swimming all by himself. All the cousins sitting on the shore, watching him, playing in the waves. And finally we said, Uncle Tom, can we go swimming? He says, you can't go swimming. Why not, Uncle Tom? If you go swimming before 30 minutes are up, you know what's going to happen? What? You're going to die. And we all started laughing. Little Mark, I don't want to die, Uncle Tom. And we were there waiting. And finally, 30 minutes were up. And Uncle Tom said, if you want to go swimming, you can come swimming. And all of the older cousins went swimming. And all of the middle cousins went swimming. And all of the younger cousins went swimming, except for little Marky. He sat on the edge of the shore, looking at the water. And we all said, come on, Marky, come swimming. And little Marky said, but I don't know how to swim. And Uncle Tom says, oh, little Marky, do you want me to teach you how to swim like I taught all the older cousins. And Oliver said, no, Marky, don't let him teach you how to swim. Little Marky said, yes, Uncle Tom, I want you to teach me how to swim like you taught the older cousins. No, Marky, don't let Uncle Tom teach you how to swim. Are you sure you want me to teach you how to swim? I'm sure, Uncle Tom. And Uncle Tom, 6 foot, 2 inches tall, firefighter, grabbed little 4-year-old Marky, 3 feet, 0 inches tall, looked out at the waves, and he went and threw Marky. We were like, and Marky landed way, 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 way out in the ocean. He was gone. And then we all started crying. You killed Marky. And he says, I didn't kill Marky. He's fine. He's not fine. And after about 3 or 4 long, long seconds, little Marky's fingers and hands, and he's spitting water. I can swim. And we all, yay, Marky can swim. And when we got back on the shore, Uncle Tom toweled us all off, threw us in the car. And as we were driving away from the beach, instead of going left towards his house, where we were going to have a big spaghetti dinner, he went right up this long, curvy, scary road. Uncle Tom, where are you going? He says, I'm going to go show you the haunted house. And all the older cousins said, there's no such thing as a haunted house. And I said, I don't know. There might be a haunted house. And little Marky said, I don't want to go to the haunted house. And Uncle Tom says, we're going to the haunted house. Be quiet. That's how things were in the 1970s. And as we're driving along, he's driving along, all of a sudden in the car, we heard. I was pretty sure it was Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom, I know you're making that noise. He says, what noise? We're driving along. Heard it again. Ooh, ooh. The older cousins are laughing. Little Marky's crying. Uncle Tom, you're making that noise. He says, I'm not making that noise. And then I stared right at him. I was staring at him to make sure I was going to catch him make that noise. And I looked, and his mouth wasn't moving when I heard. Ooh. And Uncle Tom said, it always happens when we're driving up to the haunted house, and the branches were scraping along the top of our car as we drove to a house that looked like a normal house. Uncle Tom, that looks like a normal house. Little Marky stopped crying. He says, yeah, that looks like a haunted house. And then older cousin Kathy, she says, Dad, that was her dad. Uncle Tom was her dad. Dad, this isn't a scary house. He says, yes, it is. He walked up to the window. He peered into the window and he said, oh my gosh. We went running up. Uncle Tom, what are you oh my goshing about? He said, oh my gosh. Uncle Tom, are you seeing ghosts? What's going on? And he pushed us all up, hanging on the ledge of that window. We looked into the window, and you know what we saw? Nothing. Uncle Tom, what are you oh my goshing about? He says, every time I come to this house, I look in the living room. You know what I see? What? He said, furniture, tables, chairs. And now you know what we see? I said, there's nothing in there. He says, nothing. I think a ghost moved all the chairs and tables and furniture. Uncle Tom, this isn't a haunted house. He went around the edge of the house. He peeked his head around. He said, oh my gosh. We went running around. We stuck our heads out the side of the table, at the side of that little house. We looked over. Oh my gosh. Uncle Tom, what are we oh my goshing about? He says, every time I look around the corner of this house, that back door is flapping open and flapping shut. And what do you see now? The door's shut, Uncle Tom. That's right. A ghost must have shut that door. And all the older cousins realized that Uncle Tom was making it up. And all the middle cousins realized that Uncle Tom was making it up. But little Marky said, a ghost shut the door. Oh no. And he ran back to the car. And we all started laughing. And then this happened. The door slammed open and a bunch of garbage came flying out of the door. And we all went, ah! We turned around. We went running after Marky. We jumped into the car. Uncle Tom threw it in reverse. He drove down that street in reverse, the branches scraping the top of our car. We got back to the bottom. He turned around. He took us straight to his house. He made us a great big pot of spaghetti. And we began to debate if a ghost threw garbage out of that empty house, or if Uncle Tom had one of his friends hide in that kitchen and throw garbage out of the house. To this day, all these years later, Uncle Tom will not tell us if it was a real ghost or not. That story of Uncle Tom and the haunted house was the very first story I wrote that was more than one paragraph long. That was my first book that I ever wrote. My Uncle Tom is now 85 years old. He's still super strong. And I tell him that story every now and then, and he starts to laugh. And I say, Uncle Tom, was that house haunted? He says, you're never gonna know. The second story I have for you comes from my joy of reading. I love reading so much. I read all the time. And here's a book that I read, The Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. If you would like to read a very scary, scary story, you could read any of the stories in this book. Do you know the story of Cinderella? Beautiful story of a girl going to a dance. It's a super scary story in this book. Do you know the story of Little Red Riding Hood going into the woods, and it's a super scary story in this book. If you would like a really scary story about a frog and a princess who kisses the frog, if you read the real version, it's super scary. In this book is a story called The King's Son Who Was Not Scared of Anything. And my friend Elizabeth Ellis wrote that story in this book, Ready to Tell Tales, and she turned it into a story from Appalachia. And it's a story of Jack and the haunted house. Now, this story is a little bit scary, but none of the story is real. It's all made up. So if you were like me back in the day, scared of things, this story is a silly, made up, scary story. Jack was living with his mama, and his mama said, Jack, it's time for you to go out and get a job. That's a scary story if you're an old person going out and getting a job. Fifth graders, your job is to do your homework. Go do your homework. And Jack said, okay, mama. And he went out, and the poor guy could not find a job anywhere. He walked and 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 he walked. He walked so long that he got super hungry, and he had no money and he had no food. And he got to an inn and he knocked on the door, and the innkeeper said, what do you want? I'm hungry. You got any money? No. Well, if you don't have any money, you got to go. But I'm hungry. I don't have any food. I can do jobs. I can do all kinds of jobs. I don't need any jobs here. No jobs for you. But what am I going to do? And the innkeeper said, well, if you go through the forest, up the hill, around the rock, you're going to see a house. That house is haunted. And if you can spend the night in that house and survive, you can keep that house. The king said, you can keep the house. Jack said, well, I'm not scared of anything. So he walked through the forest, up the path, around the rock, and there he saw a real, scary, haunted house. Cobwebs, owls, bats, more bats, more owls, more cobwebs, a bunch of other bats and owls and cobwebs. But Jack wasn't scared. He walked up those porch steps. They creaked. Creak, creak, creak. Now, if you happen to be scared right now, remember that this is all made up. Unless you're a fifth grader and you haven't done your homework, then yes, this is all true. And Jack opened the door, and the door opened the way the doors open in scary stories. It was a really big door. In he walked, and inside that house, there were cobwebs, bats, and owls. It was scary, but Jack went and sat next to a fireplace and he was warming himself by the fire and he didn't feel so scared anymore. He was warmed by that fire when from high up the chimney he heard, "I'm gonna fall." If you're a little scared right now, realize that this story is all made up. Unless you're a fifth grader who hasn't done their homework. This really happened. Jack heard, "I'm gonna fall." And Jack sort of carefully stuck his head down by the chimney, looked up the chimney, and he said, "Well, fall already." The ghost said, "It's gonna be scary." Jack said, "Okay." The ghost said, "It's gonna be really scary." Jack said, "Okay." And just then, something came falling down the chimney. Boom, 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 boom. Ow! Boom, 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 boom. Ow! Boom, 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 boom. And there in the chimney, out came a two-legged, two-armed, bodied, headless ghost. And the headless ghost walked up to Jack and said, "Where's my head?" And Jack said, "How are you talking without a head?" "I don't know. Where's my head?" I'm going to pause just in case you're scared. None of this happened. It's all made up. But unless you're a fifth grader, do your homework. And the ghost said, "Where's my head?" And Jack said, "Just calm down. Have a seat over there and I'll go looking for your head." Oh. Jack said, "Where'd you leave it last?" And the ghost said, "Well, I don't know, because my memories are in my head and I don't have my head." So Jack started looking. He looked in the bathroom. He pulled the shower curtain back. For some reason, the shower curtain creaked. You know what he saw in the tub? Owls, bats, and cobwebs, and a rubber ducky. He went to the kitchen. He opened up the cabinet of the kitchen. You know what he saw in the cabinet? You're never going to guess. Owls, bats, and cobwebs, and some macaroni and cheese. And he went down into the basement and he walked down the steps. Creak, 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 creak. None of this happened. Unless you're a fifth grader, do your homework. Creak, 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 creak. He got to the bottom of the basement and there in the corner, do you know what he saw? Owls. And there in the other corner, do you know what he saw? Bats. There in the other corner, do you know what he saw? Cobwebs. But in the fourth corner of the basement, do you know what he saw? A head. He grabbed the head. He gave it to the ghost, put it on the ghost's head. The ghost smiled, said, "Jack, everybody else got scared when I said, I'm gonna fall. Everyone else got scared when they saw my headless ghost coming towards them. Everyone else got scared to go down and help me find my head, but you found my head, and I'm gonna let you keep this house, and I'm never gonna haunt it again." And with that, the ghost walked through the front door, took the owls and the bats and the cobwebs with him. And Jack lived in that house for a long time. And my friend Elizabeth Ellis said the last time she saw Jack, he was doing mighty well. Elizabeth Ellis is an amazing storyteller. She has that story written in a book that all teachers should have, Ready to Tell Tales, Surefire Stories from America's Favorite Storytellers. You can find this book on Amazon, and there's stories here from some of the best storytellers in the country. It's really an amazing story. So I got that story from her in that book, but then I found it in the Brothers Grimm fairy tales. And I am going to end by talking to you all a little bit about some of the things I do to tell scary stories. You probably have noticed some of the techniques I like to use. I love sound effects with my voice. You can think about some of the sound effects that I used in the two stories that I told you. I love repetition. And I love to have pauses as I'm sort of seeing the images in the story. So I want to share with you a story that sort of tells you how to do a jump in a jump story. This is what I do when I'm telling stories. I'm going to be telling a lot of scary stories the next few days in Los Angeles, including on Halloween Day. So with a jump story, it's a little bit hard on a microphone and a Zoom, but when you're in person, it's really easy. So what you do is you start to get quieter and quieter and quieter. And at the point of the story, when everybody is listening, you get all of a sudden a little bit louder. So for instance, here's the actual jump. Boo. Did anybody jump? Probably not. So what you do is you kind of like start the story and you get quieter, quieter, and quieter, and then you wait, and then you do the sound. My friend Jim May tells this really lovely story. I forget where he found it. I should probably do a little research about that. But this shows you how to do a jump. Part of it is setting up the details of the story, and part of it is using your voice in such a way. So in a dark, dark forest, there was a dark, dark house. In the dark, dark house, there was a dark, dark room. In the dark, dark room, there was a dark, dark box. In the dark, dark box, there was a ghost. I think that is Alvin Schwartz has that in scary stories. In the dark, dark forest, dark, dark house, dark, dark room, dark, dark box, there was a ghost. That's the story. But if you sort of use a little bit of the hand gestures and a little bit of getting slower and quieter, at the very end, you can get a jump. What's going on there? The last sort of tip I'm going to share with you is for you writers out there and you teachers of writing. So I hear it from a lot of teachers around the country as I travel and as I do Zooms, that kids have trouble stretching out a story. Kids have trouble adding details to a story. And there's sort of two things that I do as a writer myself. I think about one really interesting thing. What is it that the character wants that they can't have? So think about the two stories I told you. I told you the story of Uncle Tom and all the cousins, where we went to the beach and we went to the haunted house. If you think about that story, a lot of the characters want something they can't have. I could have told you the story. My Uncle Tom took all of us to the beach. He gave us sandwiches. We went swimming. Then we went to see a haunted house. It was scary. The end. And that would be, oh, that's right. I wanted, yeah, thank you so much, all of you, for checking in. There's going to be a link to these stories so you can share them with other classrooms as well. And I'm going to just give this little writing tip for those of you who can stay on. If you can't stay on, that's okay. I'm going to give the link for this. You'll find this in the email, the follow up to this again. Thank you so much for being with me here, all of you as well. So this is the last five minutes or so. I'm just going to talk a little bit about writing tips, and I'm going to check to see if any of you have any questions. You can throw them in the chat. Oh, Aneche de Cuba, the North. I'm just looking at the chat. I wasn't looking at that. So anyway, I wanted to say that the details of a story where the character wants something they can't have. So all of us want to get to the beach. Uncle Tom wants to swim all by himself. We want to go swimming, but we don't want to wait 30 minutes. Marky wants to swim, but he can't swim. Our cousins don't want Marky to drown, dying in the water. When we're driving up to the haunted house, we want to know who's making that scary sound. When we get to, so if you think about any story you're working on, whatever you're writing, even if you're looking at small moments or personal narrative, a lot of you teachers are in personal narrative this fall. What is it that the character wants that they can't have? My daughter's playing volleyball now, and I could write a story about her. My daughter plays volleyball. She loved it at the end. Well, what is it that she wants that she can't have? She wants to be able to bump the ball up. She wants to be able to figure out how to do it. She wants her team to have fun. She wants to get to practice on time, but it's hard to find the place. So what is it the character wants that they can't have? If you think about the Jack story, Jack wants a job. He can't find it. The innkeeper doesn't want to get bothered by Jack. Jack wants to stay in peace in the house. The cobwebs and the bats and the owls want to be left alone. The ghost wants his head. So if you get a little stuck with your story, ask yourself, what does my character want? And then how does that character get what they want? If you don't quite know what your character wants yet, you have a little bit of rewriting to do. And that includes just personal stories. What is it? I think we read stories or we listen to stories to see what's going to happen. Is Marky going to die? Is that house really haunted? Does Jack help that ghost? Does he get food finally? And then the second thing I would say is really just paying attention to the setting. Really paint the picture of where you are. Even in my two stories, I didn't spend a lot of time on the setting, but could you picture the family at the beach? Could you picture that ride in the car? Could you picture what that nondescript haunted house looked like when Uncle Tom took us to that house? So the more you spend on sort of just the small details of the setting and the characters, and the more you figure out what the character wants, the better your writing is going to be as you rewrite. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spend a couple of minutes and just if you have any questions, you can throw them in the chat. I want to thank all of the schools that showed up from all over. We had lots of different states that were here. Teachers, you can find all my books on Amazon. I got a bunch of books, including one that just came out. And you can find more information from me on the email that we'll send out with the link. And if I think my daughter's class was watching. So I'm looking at this. How do I come up with a story idea? That's from a fifth grade class here in Los Angeles. So I spend a lot of time reading. I will say that when I'm stuck on a story idea, I spend a lot of time reading. So I get a lot of inspiration from reading. I also spend a lot of time just observing. I look around the world and I just start to ask questions. As a matter of fact, I just told my daughter the story yesterday. I was walking near the reservoir where I live here in Los Angeles, and there was a hawk standing on the ground. And I stared at it. I was like, what is that hawk doing staring on the ground? And I was watching it, and I realized that a hawk is really a pretty big animal. And then as I was really observing that hawk, trying to stare at it, all of a sudden it flew in the air and its talons was holding a mouse. And I felt bad for the mouse, but then I felt, well, how did that hawk get it? And so I got an idea just from nature, looking at nature. What do hawks eat? How do mice hide? What happens? How do they catch them? Where are they? So I get a lot of ideas from that. So that's one of the ways that I come up with an idea. Who inspired me to write? There's another question from a fifth grader. My mom always had books around our house, but another thing she did is she gave us journals to write in. So just asking my mom, what do I write in a journal? And she said exactly what I just told you. Just look around and write down what you see. And then I really got inspired by some amazing writers. I met Sandra Cisneros. She wrote a book called House on Mango Street. And I've talked to her a few times. She's kind of a mentor of mine. And I remember when I was trying to begin to become an author, she said, you just have to keep writing. She said, it's like a sport. I used to play soccer. I still play soccer. I love soccer. She said, do you practice soccer? I said, I practice soccer almost every day. She said, I practice writing every day. So Sandra Cisneros inspired me. Juan Felipe Herrera is another amazing author who inspired me. I was able to meet some authors on a recent author visit. So I'm inspired by writers and the reading and the writing that they do. Any tips on coming up with titles? You are asking the wrong person about title tips, because every time I come up with a title, my agent tells me it's a dumb title. Titles are really hard. So I think what you want to do is, actually, this is very interesting. If you can identify what the character wants, then you're close to what the title of the story should be. So, if you think about, I don't really have a real title for the Uncle Tom story, but maybe it's, you know what? I don't know. I would say this, coming up with titles, I will often write 20 different titles for a story that I'm working on. And I just keep writing and writing. And usually by the 15th title, I'll come up with the perfect title for the book. But, often you can just state who the main character is. So, Jack and the Haunted House, that's the name of that story, Jack and the Haunted House. Uncle Tom's story, it's I'm Gonna Die. So I took a line of dialogue for the title of my story. I love these fifth grade questions. So the question of how do you structure a story? So for me personally, and I will say that there's many different ways that you can structure a story. Structuring a story, though, there's a kind of a classic structure. You need somebody, a character, and the character can be a person or an animal, could be something. You need a place, and you need a problem. The way I identify the problem, what does the character want that they can't have? So, Uncle Tom's story, Uncle Tom and the cousins and little Marky and me. Place, the beach. What do we want that we can't have? Marky doesn't want to die. Uncle Tom wants Marky to swim. So that's how I structure it. And then the very end, did Marky die? Did Marky learn to swim? Did they get to the haunted house? So for me, the structure is that, oh, we are at our time. So one more question, fifth graders or any other students out there and teachers, I'm going to be doing this about once a month. I'm going to be trying to do this for different themes. I love that all of you are here. I love the questions from the fifth graders. I love that my home state of Delaware dropped in. If there's any more questions, Angela Lloyd is at The Mysteries of Harris Burdick by Chris Van Allsburg. Teachers in the chat, you will see that. Thank you, Room 14 in fifth grade. I'm so glad you were there. Thank you, teachers and parents from around the country. I'm really glad that you were here as well. Look for an email with the recording. You will get it later on today. And I am so happy to be with you. Happy Halloween. Don't scare your brothers or sisters or your parents or your guardians too much. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you all very, very much.